introduction. So I'm Detective Reed, and I have the honor to do a interview-style session with Hope and Jerome. And it's the first time for me too. I've done some work with Hope before, it was amazing. And Jerome has just such a story to tell, which is going to tug on your heartstrings. And we chose a couple questions which we believe everybody wants to ask. Everybody wants to ask, if you ever get your hands on a survivor, what is it that you want to know? And we chose those questions. Feel free later when we're done to ask questions too. Hope and Jerome are very open to answering questions. I think that you guys want to address the audience before we start.
Thank you. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today, because just being here today, you're making a difference in the fight against human trafficking. I want to thank Ellie for moderating this panel, and most of all, the Human Trafficking Task Force of Southern Colorado for bringing me here today, and for all the amazing work that they're doing. They are just making such great strides in putting an end to the scourge of human trafficking, and I just am so honored to be here today on this panel and to be able to speak to you.
Hi, I'm Hope. I want to extend a very warm, deep-hearted thank you to all of you for coming here, because this is the first step, is educating yourself and then being able to pass along the information to other people, and then we can actually make a big dent and a change in stopping this, and then the aftercare of the victims. So hopefully we can prevent this in the future.
I want to address you as the audience. I'm going to ask very intimate questions. There might be survivors of commercial sexual exploitation here in the audience. If you feel that this is getting to you, we are going to be here later to answer questions and reach out to you to address any issues or anything we can do to help you out. So Jerome, I'll start with you. You were trafficked at the age of 5. Tell me about that, and also tell me, where did this happen to you?
Well, Ellie, thank you for that question. My story is unfortunately far too common in the world of human trafficking. I was a child born into a world of dysfunction. My mother was an alcoholic and pregnant at 17. My biological father, they couldn't afford to support me, so my biological father joined the Army when they got pregnant. And when he came back, and this was during the 1960s, he was deployed overseas, and like many people who came back during that era, he was a different person, filled with a rage and an anger that my mother and I couldn't understand. Unfortunately, we became the targets for his rage, and my first memory as a 3-year-old is the sound of my father's hand hitting my mother's face. So I was exposed to domestic violence as a young child. The marriage, of course, didn't last. My mother was soon divorced from him. It was after that my mother met a man that we thought was the answer to our prayers. He was nice, he took me to sporting events, he gave me gifts, treated my mother well. She seemed to be improving in terms of her alcoholism. But after they were married, his hugs turned to long embraces, and before long he was molesting me. He used threats of violence against my mother. He said that if I spoke out, he would kill me. Even though my mother, had been a train wreck and an alcoholic, my love for her was still unconditional, and I would do anything to protect her. After he began molesting me, it wasn't long before he started using me for child pornography. It was much soon after that he introduced me to the pedophile ring he belonged to. And as my initiation into the pedophile ring he belonged to, I was raped and beaten by each of the 10 members. The first time I was trafficked at the age of 5, I was handcuffed to a truck stop bathroom and raped for 6 hours by a collection of men and 1 woman. This continued for 7 years of my life. I tried to speak out many times, acted to 10 people, and no one ever listened to me.
Hope, the tragedy in your life started when you were about 10 and a half years ago. Tell me, how did you get dragged into this?
Well, I came from a very normal, what looks like normal on the outside, middle-class family, 4 generations of accountants, and but on the inside of the home there was a lot of abuse, dysfunction, alcoholism, and so a lot of domestic violence against my mother as well. And so I ended up running away from home multiple times. This occurred in Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon, just as of 2 years ago, is #2 in the nation for minor sex trafficking. So it's quite an epidemic over there. So within a matter of hours of me running away from home, I was approached by my first trafficker, which actually was a female. I had multiple traffickers from the ages of 10 to 15, both young and old, male and female, law-abiding to criminal, to drug user, to non-drug user, different social classes. And same thing with the sex buyers who were buying me as a child. Came from different walks of life as well. And so I would find opportunities, I would wait for the perfect opportunity to escape. But I was re-trafficked multiple times, so every time I'd go back home, I wouldn't tell anybody what happened, including my parents, medical staff, school. Nobody asked me questions of what happened when I was running away and why I was acting out or why I was missing school. And so as soon as things got bad at home again, I would leave, run away, because being on the streets was a better alternative than, living in a very toxic, dysfunctional home. I was also a victim of child pornography at the age of 11 and a half, which happened. I was approached by that trafficker in broad daylight in a very, very nice suburban neighborhood. I was just walking along. I was a latchkey kid because my mom was a single mom most of the time, working all the time. He approached me, told me I was beautiful, that I should be a model, and convinced me that he was a professional photographer. And so I got in his car. Children are very trusting, even though we're taught about stranger danger. Went with him because especially girls, we want to be that fairy tale like princess, to be, feel pretty, and so he knew exactly what to say to draw me in. He was definitely a professional at what he was doing with the child pornography. When I arrived at his home, he had an entire studio set up with like professional equipment, lights and cameras and video cameras and lingerie and sexy clothing. Pornography was playing on one of the TVs, and there was pornography everywhere. I felt very trapped. And so the sad thing is knowing that probably to this day, those images are probably still out there of me that other pedophiles are looking at, which is very sickening to me. And there's probably thousands of victims that this child pornographer, and probably trafficking as well, because that's very linked.
How long, Hope, has it taken you to speak out?
15 years. So I finally escaped completely from the child sex trafficking at the age of 15, kind of moved on with my life, and then 2 years ago, I was strangled until unconscious, almost died, and he actually attempted to traffic me, and I refused, and so I was abused every day. So that was kind of a wake-up call for me. I met you guys, and from there, sharing my story, you guys helped me to do that. So I've only been speaking about this actively for just this year, 2015, and just started kind of sharing my story with people that I'm close with about 2 years ago. So it took a really long time, as in Jerome's case as well, because it's not something that people openly talk about, even if you're going through it, go, oh, hey, I'm a trafficking victim, we don't identify like that, and there's a lot of shame that comes with that. So you wonder how people are gonna, think of you or treat you or judge you, or you're afraid to get hurt again because that trust has been broken, because the very people that abused you abuse that trust, so you don't trust people anymore.
Jerome, how many years has it taken you to speak about this?
40 years.
40.
And that's 12 years in the United States Marine Corps after high school, and 25 years of therapy that I went through to actually be able to speak about this. But I want to say that I have to thank a female survivor, because one of the struggles we face as male survivors of sex trafficking is that our egos imprison us. We're not willing to admit that we're vulnerable, that we're powerless, so we remain trapped in these situations and we don't ask for help. And so as a female survivor, that really taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that you can be strong and vulnerable. And so that, for me, was one of the pivotal times in my life where I was able to actually begin healing. And in terms of male victims of sex trafficking, the organization ECPAT and the John Jay College of Criminal Justice did a study in New York. And they found that of those children being sexually trafficked, 50% of those were boys. The study also found that trafficked boys are more likely to be arrested for shoplifting or petty theft than to be arrested for trafficking. And so that's why I'm here to shine a light and say to every victim, including men who are trafficked as boys, it's okay to speak out. There's a healing and a strength in that, and I'm here today not only as a survivor, but a living testament that there's a hope and a light inside each of us that no one can extinguish.
And this is huge. When we speak about survivors or victims of human trafficking, we often address the girls, the females, and there is nobody immune to this, not our boys, not our LGBT community or our transgender community. I want you to really, really keep that in the back of your mind. Jerome, when you began to speak out, when you made statements about being trafficked during the time you were trafficked and after, what was people's reaction like?
Oh gosh. And keep in mind, this was actually during the 1970s, and we're much better off than we were then. I tried to tell a total of 10 people. One of the caveats I want to add to my opening statement is that I was trafficked in school. I attended school every day. I was trafficked after school, during holidays and weekends, and I was actually pulled out of school. This is far too common, and according to the numbers that we see right now, 36% of victims are trafficked by their families. So this is far too common. I tried to tell one of my teachers, and it was a female teacher, and she began to molest me, and she molested me for a little over a year. In one instance, one of my traffickers or handlers took me in because I had made a mistake, and I was punished by being kicked in the ribs by the leader of the pedophile ring who had cowboy boots on, so I had 3 bruised ribs. I came into the ER with 3 bruised ribs, and I found a moment where my trafficker had left the room, so I whispered in the doctor's ear that they were doing bad things to me and I needed help. 3 hours later, I returned to the same ER with 3 broken ribs. The doctor had told my trafficker that I was making up stories, and I had a vivid imagination. Right now in this country today, studies have found that less than 10% of professionals have the training to recognize a victim of human trafficking. So that's an area that I really advocate for awareness and education in.
Hope, the same question for you. What were people's reaction when you reached out and made a statement about being trafficked?
So it wasn't spoken about while I was being trafficked. I think my family is still processing it. My mother has gone through some very severe child sexual trauma, repeated, and so for her it's kind of shocking, I think, because she almost blames herself because, you know, that it happened. I think people are pretty shocked. I'm an Air Force veteran. I have a background in accounting and business, which I'm changing my degree to be a therapist now. But I think it's very shocking because if you saw someone like me or Jerome like in the grocery store, you wouldn't be like, oh, I bet, you know, they're a victim of trafficking. And so I did get a lot of support from people that already know me. And as I'm telling people, even like, you know, in the grocery store, and I talk about, you know, the task force and what we're doing here in Colorado Springs, and then that I'm a survivor, I think it's kind of shocking to people because it hits home that somebody you know has gone through this, somebody that you go to church with, that you work with, that you live next to. So I think it's very shocking for people, but it is nice to have that support because it is a very vulnerable position to share that with people. I have actually had some people, when they got upset, they would bring that up as an abusive way to hurt me. to make me feel shame or to make me feel less than them or, stigmatized, yeah. But for the overall, I would say everybody's been pretty supportive, and it is shocking.
When we look at, Sergeant Simpson did a phenomenal job kind of talking about all the aspects of human trafficking, the pimps, the victims, and the sex buyers. Tell me, who bought your sex services? Who were the people who abused you?
Majority was men, older than my dad's age, middle class, you know, had nice homes, nice cars, normal families, and they looked, sex buyers, there's not a typical sex buyer, I guess, because they do come from all walks of life. So,
could you put them in like, say, 2 categories?
yeah, I would say the first category that sought me after the most was the ones I was telling you about, you know, the middle class, they're married, they're, you know, 40s, 50s, businessmen, nice neighborhoods, sought me out more than the second category. The second category is, of course, you know, the criminal, drug using, you know, so there is no stereotype to a sex buyer, and I think it is very shocking when other people hear, you know, which category of sex buyers sought me out the most. So mostly men, and kind of like with Jerome's story, both male and female Johns, but in my case as a child was mostly men. And I'm not quite sure where they sold me at. That's kind of the other question is back then. Where were these sex buyers looking to buy children for sex?
What method of advertising?
Yeah.
Like now today we have Backpage and other internet outlets, but for you it's been many years, so that's an unanswered question. Jerome, would you agree with what Hope said about the categories of the sex buyer?
Oh, Ellie, absolutely. I mean, I like to say that the people who bought my services were those that would sit beside you in church on Sunday morning. There's really no differentiation. I mean, it defies socioeconomic status, I mean, ethnicity, race. But again, as Hope said, I mean, I think I was really surprised at the quote-unquote pillars of the community that were actually buying my services that would pontificate. And I always say that sexual predators are cloaked in respectability. That's their best camouflage. I call them stealth predators, because I think Ellie will agree with me that the way they work, you know, they're really hard to pick up because they just are so skilled at what they do, and there's such an incredible network that they have going. And that's how I was trafficked, even in the 70s. I mean, with an underground network that they had that has only grown due to the internet.
More and more sophisticated. What kept you trapped in this, Jerome?
Fear. And unfortunately, you know, as a child of dysfunction, when you're abused as a child and you come from a family where there's alcoholism and domestic violence, you're already made to feel worthless. And so when your self-esteem is non-existent, the movement to being trafficked is lateral. It's a very easy move. And one of the comments I wanted to make, which I think really shocks people, is that there are many people that I talk to who say, you know what, I didn't realize I was being trafficked. Because when you're under those circumstances, it's all a mass of dysfunction and pain and depravity. And so to really empower somebody, to let them know, yes, you were sold, you know, you were taken advantage of. You really have to acknowledge that, you know, as children, we were vulnerable, we were victimized, and we were powerless to stop what was happening to us.
Slaves did not realize that they were slaves. Hope, also for you, I'm almost like wanting to throw this at you, but why didn't you just get up and leave?
That's a good question. I'm sure a lot of people ask that. I want to kind of compare it to the domestic violence cycle, or if you know about Elizabeth Smart with the Stockholm Syndrome. They are invisible chains. Yes, sometimes you are physically, chained down or restrained or locked up so you can't leave with no access to a phone, no access to ID, sometimes not even knowing where you're at because you're moved around so frequently. And then they also try to control you, the traffickers will, by medicating you against your will. Drugs, alcohol, pills of unknown origin to get you to oblige so you can't leave. So, but really it's those invisible chains, the psychological abuse, I think, is worse because of the brainwashing and the grooming process that's involved. So you're trapped. You really are in a trapped situation, especially being a child. And I also want to bring the awareness that adults that are trafficked are under those same invisible chains. Just because they're an adult doesn't mean that they still have that choice. Most likely they've been victimized, trafficked before. So I just want to put that out there, that it's very hard to put into words. Maybe you can help put that into words better about the invisible chains and why it's so hard to leave.
It's a fear like you can never explain. I mean, it's like if anybody's ever been in a car accident and you remember the minute the seconds that led to that where you see it happening, if you replicate that 24/7 in someone's mind, that fear, and they will tell you. And and I want to also just say this. Thank God for Ellie and Craig, because also one of the factors is that back when I was being trafficked, you did not go to the police because you were told, and this was true back then, they will throw you in jail. They will put you in prison and lock you up. Now views with people like Ellie have changed so dramatically that they're actually reaching out and enforcing things with their heart and not their head, which really makes a difference. So, and traffickers will tell you, I will find you, I will get you. And so for myself, one of the stories I like to tell is that, and we talk about traffickers and mentality, is that I saw people who were trafficked beside me, in particular, a young boy choked to death as a lesson to everybody else that you did not disobey the traffickers and you did not speak out. And he was choked to death right in front of my eyes. I see his face every night. He's what drives me to be here today. His death was covered up, of course. And so these individuals, I think, not so much now, have operated with impunity that the law now is catching up with them in their methods. So there's a feel that's instilled in you, and when your family doesn't care about you, when your family could care less. I tell people one of the things that when I try to tell my family things, that they would all say you're being selfish, you're not, And so when you're in that just massive dysfunction and no one believes you, one of the statistics right now is that a child who's being abused sexually has to tell an average of 7 adults before they're believed. The first victim of Jerry Sandusky's that spoke out went to his high school principal and said, Jerry Sandusky's molesting me. His high school principal said, what do you get Jerry in trouble for? He's a great guy. So those are the barriers that we face as children in speaking out where we're not believed. And we've gotten so much better through people like Ellie and Crick of believing children and understanding that no one's going to make this up. And so, there's just a level of fear when you feel like you can trust no one. And they really just try to break your spirit. They beat you down to the point where you feel like, you don't deserve anything. And they make you think that what they give you is a gift, and it's a very convoluted sense of love that a trafficker will try and enslave you with. And so you feel like there's no place to turn and that there's no alternative for you. But thank God for Ellie and Craig that there is now.
Thank you so much. And during our investigations, we have often encountered where survivors are held back by brute force, by their traffickers. Brute force, stories you will never ever believe. We also had investigations where the traffickers, they were a finesse person, they were a boyfriend. They knew exactly what void in the victim's life they had to fill. Oh, you've been homeless on the street. You know what? I have a beautiful house. Come home with me, take a shower. Let's watch TV, let's kick it. I'll cook dinner for you, whatever it is. And of course, why would the victim remain on the street? These traffickers, these predators know exactly what void to fill in that victim's life, and they swoop in and carry them open in their open arms. So you have both sides. You have the force, and you also have the mental, the void to fill. So we see both sides of the spectrum. Jerome, what eventually made you get out?
Oh gosh. At the age of 12, I was a child affected with hopelessness. I had told anybody I could tell, no one believed me. I felt like there was nothing I could do. I went to my mother's medicine cabinet. I got a bottle of sleeping pills. I went to my stepfather's liquor cabinet and got a bottle of vodka. I went into my mother's rose garden, which she cared more for the roses than she did for me. And I took the sleeping pills and drank the vodka. I drifted off and awoke in an emergency room. I've been clinically dead for 3 minutes. And that was the signal flare that finally got me noticed by social services in the county. And so it was that day that I finally escaped child sex trafficking.
And you remember Sergeant Simpson's presentation earlier, 50% of survivors, victims of human trafficking have contemplated or attempted suicide. Hope, what was your force to get you out of this?
A little bit of hope. I didn't have anybody, I guess, like to rescue me, kind of like your situation. I should have been on the radar. Like a lot of people overlooked a lot of things. So, I guess in a sense, I rescued myself. I just had a very strong internal force not to give up, even when you wanted to die because of the horrible things that were being done to you. I just held on. I guess because I'm kind of a fighter a little bit on the inside, even as sweet and soft as I am, I have that kind of internal just force to hold on. And I think that's what gets victims through, because it's just that little bit of hope. If you can hold on just to a tiny bit to get through. Because a lot of times as victims, we leave our bodies a lot of the time. It's called dissociation, because we cannot even bear to even be in our bodies at the time that those things are happening to us. So I think that's why we're called survivors, because we have survived. And Jerome also brought, we're not just survivors, we're thrivers. We're thriving, we're having a wonderful life. What has happened does not define us. It's just a part of our story. So I take great pride in being a survivor and being a voice for other victims that are going through this, because it does take a lot of courage to speak up about this, especially when it comes to your own pain and suffering that you've gone through. And then also knowing the realities that there are far worse situations that are going on to other children as we speak, which is sickening. And I think that, God, or whatever you want to call it, the good energy in the universe. I think, yes, bad things do happen to good people, but I think the great thing is that, when horrible things do happen to good people, like Jerome and myself and other victims and survivors, there is a reason for it. Like, so much good comes out of it and so much power. It's very, very empowering to speak up about this.
Yeah, that's very true. Hope, tell me, how has being the survivor of sex trafficking, how has it impacted you? How does it impact you today, and how will it impact you for the rest of your life?
This is kind of a little bit more personal. There's physical, mental, social, let's say emotional, sexual. It affects every part of your life, every part of your being, because it really is a crime against somebody's soul. It really is. And so the pain and the horrible things that were done, I think, manifest over many years in different forms. I had a lot of health issues. I am a survivor of a traumatic brain injury, which I have overcome. I'm about 2 years into recovery, doing phenomenal. I should have been disabled. I still struggle. Like, I have vision issues, balance issues. I have severe memory loss. I have severe PTSD. Of course, I had some pretty bad social anxiety, especially after kind of the last trauma that caused my brain injury. I also have, let me see, I would say that I don't show some of my emotions very outwardly because they're intense.